People, let's get this party started. I see some wanderers. Clifford's one of them at the back. Psst. Psst. See, he distilled. This is what happens when you're married too many years. Psst. Everybody wave at Clifford. All right. Okay. It's going to be a busy, jammed morning. There's going to be a lot of things that we want to be able to share. We want you to share with us. That's going to be really important today. We went with a panel this year because we felt, based on all of these conversations that we're having with all these people, but we're all kind of talking the same stuff. I thought today was a day we just need to share in all that stuff. So I want to make reference, if you haven't been watching the screens, it's really just to kind of profile a little bit about what we are and some of the messaging that we want to bring about today. So for those who don't know, of course, I'm Deb Wiegers, and myself, along with Cliff Wiegers, I'm like staring at a blinded light, so if I look like I'm a deer in the headlights, I'm kind of like, but Cliff and I are here. There's Clifford, and I've got an amazing team that's here, so we'll introduce them as well. But obviously, Wiegers Financial and Benefits is a financial planning and a benefits firm, and we've got many areas of expertise, of which you'll meet some of those people today. So there's a few of them dispersed throughout the tables, and we'll get a chance to introduce them, and hopefully you've had a chance to chat with them already. So let's just get rolling. I want to just maybe talk about what the theme is today. It's about collaboration. So when you saw the invitation, it was for the health of it. So I almost wanted to swear, but I didn't. So it's like for the health of it. It's collaborating for financial, mental, and physical well-being. And it's really important today that we really understand that we're all in this for the pursuit of better. And we want to come out of this thinking that although there's going to be a lot of change, because change is happening, and it's happening very quickly in the benefits industry. I've been in this business, I'm dating myself, 30 years, but I can tell you right now, in the last 2 or 3 years, I'd even say 2 years, I've seen more change in the benefits industry and in the indirect industries that affect us than I've seen in 30 years. And it's going to continue to change. So we're going to do our best to stay on top of what those things are. But what I'm really seeing that's quite obvious is that there is a time today that we need to come together and we need to collaborate. And that means as employers, as business, as government, as families, we need to start to all put our heads into this and say, how can we do our best to be better? So that's going to be the message today. And the goal will be to learn, discover, grow, interact, and please leave optimistic. I'm not here to make you go, oh my God, it's all over. It's not. This is an opportunity. I'm thinking this is a huge opportunity. So please embrace that today, okay? Now, benefits team, I'm going to get you to stand. And Brenda, who's been kind of the cheerleader of all this, is Brenda? There's Brenda. Okay, Brenda, Matt, Lana. I'm looking at lights, so if I stare the other direction, forgive me. Julian, Amanda, Jenny, Jamie, Marissa. Are y'all standing? And wave. Please stand and wave. This is my family, and these are the people that take care of me. So although I might be the mama bear some days, more times than not, they're the mama bear for me. So the retirement team, you're going to meet Renee. She's going to be wandering around with the mic when we get into the panel questions. So Renee and Danielle. Where are you gals? There's Danielle. Renee's hiding on us. Oh, there's Renee back there. Oh, see. I know, she's like 3 feet higher than me now. It's like, whatever. So, financial. We've got Cliff, of course, Charlene, Morris, and Pat's lumped in there, we're not sure why, but Pat is the mama bear of all of us. So she runs the HR department, and she's the one that really has to kind of whip us into shape when we start to whine and complain too much. So have you guys all stood? You're not standing, Pat. All right, take a wave. Thank you. And we've got Candace. She's our marketing gal right now today. Tanya, unfortunately, is away. Candace is the gal that's taken over the ship on the marketing. And Candace is somewhere. Waving. Thank you. And Phil. Phil is just like, he's like the guy that takes care of like absolutely everything. And if you ever need to get a ride on a plane somewhere, he does that too. And if you got to get a wedding done, photography, he does that too. So he's a jack of all trades. So thank you very much for coming out and being part of this. I want to introduce the wellness partners. And again, I'm going to get you to stand just because there's so many people in the room. And there is, obviously, you've seen on our screen, we've got wellness partners. So part of what we're trying to do is that, no, I'm not going to be the one running the yoga class, but we do have partnerships with people in different areas of wellness because not everybody picks up on wellness in one way. So here's our partners that are here today with us. Clay Sparks from Breeze Cycle and Yoga, and Lisa from the Willows. So if you ever want to take in a golf game. Haley from Warman Physiotherapy and Wellness. There's Haley, and Haley will be formally introduced as we get into the panel. And we do have a new partner. So Karen Broda, where's Karen? Karen, there's Karen. So Karen is going to whip us into shape too. So she's going to do a little bit of a coffee break warm up. And she's our newest partner. So she is a certified trainer and fitness coach. And her company is called Strong and Smart. So we're totally excited because it's interesting when I get talking to Haley and Karen might be popping in with a question when Haley's on the panel, because these two actually work in sync, and you wouldn't think that. But when you talk to Karen and we talk about workouts, and then when people come to her and they go, you know, like she's trying to work with someone who's coming off an injury, for example. Well, then she'll say, hey, did you get your physio? Are you doing your physio? No, I didn't do it. I stopped doing that. It doesn't work. And then Karen says, you need to do this because I can't do what I do best unless you do what Haley's telling you. So when we talk about this collaboration, we already see that part happening. And both are very much on that mission of preventative. So we'll talk a bit more of that when we get into the panel. What else do we need to know? The PowerPoint is, again, going to be scrolling. Maybe it'll come off when the speaker's on, and then we'll also bring it back at the coffee break. But again, please read some of those kind of fine lines that we are trying to implement in terms of just change that we're trying to make. I want to say thank you to Manulife, because if you really feel in the mood, you can chuck these things and no one's going to break a nose. So I thought these were the coolest things ever. I was actually fighting for the broccoli. So yeah, see? And it's not taken, so I'm taking the broccoli. So, oh, that's cauliflower. Don't you know your vegetables yet? Sherry. White broccoli. Okay, it's close. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring just one more thanks and stand up on our partners. So we've got wellness partners. We've also got this collaboration of partners. So Hanif from Express Employment Professionals. He's going to be formally introduced in the panel, but please stand. And he works in a couple of areas. His expertise, or his company is Express Employment Professionals, but he also has a very, very long resume with respect to working with companies and looking at leadership. He's worked in the wellness field, so he's certainly got a wealth of knowledge and expertise to bring to us as partners, but as well to bring to you as clients of ours. And Gary Mearns is new to our partners. So Gary is GMA Consulting, and he's 35 years in the consulting, HR consulting field, focusing in strategic HR plans, bringing development and implementation of just different programs. And he also teaches at the university, so the Edwards School. So it's quite neat. He's in the same building as my kids going to school. So it's great to have this wisdom. And it's awesome to have this forward thinking all in one package. So thanks for coming out, Gary. And we're going to introduce Leon from Bridges. So Bridges Health. Again, another one of our partners. What they do is they're a multidisciplinary workplace wellness resource offering holistic health and wellness strategies. So what they do is they come into the organizations and they provide programs and services that assist and support the employer and the individuals. And is really working with what we're going to talk about today: presenteeism, absenteeism, injury, illness, mental health, and rehabilitation. So there's lots to be offered through that organization. And when we see this opportunity where we can segue into these areas of partners, that's what we're going to do and share with you. So at this moment, I'm going to bring up Matt, and Matt's going to formally introduce Sherry, who's going to be our first speaker today. And I want to just say also, I know Matt's used to me now. I want to also, you have to stand on this side and just like bend down. Just do this. Okay. Okay, so I want to encourage questions. See, now we're the same height. I want to encourage questions. I know Renee's going to be walking around with the mic when we do get into questions. You raise your hand. She's going to bring the mic to you. If you have a really loud voice, you can just shout it out too. We may need to repeat it just to make sure the audience can hear it. But if you don't want to, there's going to be these cards on the table. You're more than welcome to write your message and throw your hand up, and one of the team members will come grab it, because we understand that some of the questions might be a little bit sensitive. The other thing you can do is you can text this number. So if you got a pen, you can text this number. It's 306-380-2453. So if you want to text that, they'll bring that question to us as we get into the panel, or if it applies to Sherry as well. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Matt. Mike?
Thanks, Deb. So thanks again for coming, everyone, this lovely Wednesday morning, although we can't really see. If you get an opportunity during one of the breaks, take a look outside. The view is absolutely amazing. So, my name is Matthew Hill. I'm on the benefits team here at Wiegers, and it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Sherry Norris. So Sherry is the Director of Life and Disability Services at Saskatchewan Blue Cross. She has a passion for disability management and has been in the industry for over 25 years. So I'm very excited for her to share her wealth of knowledge with us this morning. So with further ado, Sherry.
Thanks. Thanks, Matt. All right, let's see. I know that water's gonna fall, so I better put that over here. On a personal level, I did say to Matt he could share some personal things, but maybe I'll just do that just so that I'm a real person for you folks. I actually moved from southwestern Ontario about 7 months ago to join Saskatchewan Blue Cross. I'm a non-practicing registered nurse from Ontario. That's many years ago now, as Matt said. I've been in the disability insurance industry for over 25 years. I really am enjoying my move to Saskatchewan, learning lots of neat things, and certainly recognizing some differences between what I did in Ontario to what I'm doing here, but love it. You folks are very welcoming, and we've really made the transition very, very well, so thanks. I wanted to thank everybody for their time today. I know you all have very busy schedules, and I'm really passionate about these topics, and so I really appreciate that I can share this information with you today. I think some of the information I'm going to share with you is probably not new. It's probably stuff you already know, but I thought it would be a good level set to make sure that we're all on the same page. And you know, I also find that sometimes little reminders about things help throughout the time. These lights, if I can't see you, I'm sorry, because the lights are in my eyes. I almost feel like a rock star. I am, yeah, thanks Deb, thanks. In terms of disability, we all know disability management is a complex thing, and there are multiple organizations and people that are affected by that. First off, the employee and all of their family, the employer, the medical community, government, businesses and practices, and lots of others like insurance providers, those kinds of things. So there's probably a lot more, and we all know that disability management costs are on the rise, right? So, and they're complex to manage. So why are those costs on the rise? And let's see if I can get this to work. Oh, look at that, yeah. So I would suggest for me, I think of three root causes as to why things are on the rise. And first off is that aging population. The other thing that I think about is there's advancements in medical treatment, and also there's improved education. So why do I use those three as the root causes of why I think disability management has costs have increased. And here's some, so I thought about people and the variety of the audience, so there might be some people in the audience who really like statistics, so I thought I'd throw up some statistics for you. But here's the reason why I believe these three things are actually the reason why things are more money. And I know that for the average age of life expectancy is on the rise. I know a couple of years ago, all those actuarial people in the insurance industry actually had to change all of their actuarial tables to throw in new risk assessments because of those rising life expectancies. And there's the average age for men and women, 80 and 84. Also, in terms of medical statistics and treatment, the Canadian Cancer Society is showing statistics there that say that the death rates are lowering for cancer, and so that's a good news story. People are surviving and responding better to the treatment. As well, you can see that the average cancer survival rates actually have gone way down from the 1990s. And then the actual educational, when I looked at Stats Canada, they said that the average, there's an 11% increase in the number of people who are getting post-secondary education. And I think that it speaks a lot to people knowing about health and just having a better knowledge base. So what does that mean in terms of why that means our costs are increased? And I think that means then that people are living longer, they're managing with their illnesses longer, they're staying in the workforce, and therefore, you know, they may have more absence days because now they're able to go back to work, but they still need those times off as a result of some of that. So we've got increased absences, which equal increased costs. The other thing is, if you look at Stats Canada, they've actually seen a 13% increase over a 4-year period of the number of absenteeism days. That doesn't consider all of that other word that we hear a lot in the industry, and that's presenteeism. Everybody heard presenteeism? That's the new word. So people at work who are there, but they've got so much on their plate or what's going on that they're only giving 50%, but they're at the office, they're working, but not maybe at the capacity that they need to be. In terms of cost, I was trying to find a more recent statistic, but the only one I could find was from 2012 from the Conference Board of Canada, and they said in 2012 the cost for absenteeism alone was $16.6 billion. So for me, I think, well, now it's 2019, that might be maybe $20 billion now? Who knows, right? And then in terms of if you add that presenteeism cost, it's probably double that. So we all know that the cost is on the rise, and I think those are the reasons that I see for why they're on the rise. So what can we do to manage some of those costs? What I'm hoping today is that we give you some information and education about what you can do concretely to help manage some of those costs. And what I thought is let's start at the beginning, and of course this is all about disability management for me, so I wanted to talk about roles and responsibilities and how we can all work together collaboratively. And I think all of those people that are affected by absences have roles and responsibilities to play. And so I thought let's talk about what those roles and responsibilities are to help us work more collaboratively together. Of course, the biggest solution, and Deb mentioned, is prevention, right? So I don't even want to see claims because that's the best way to sort of live healthier lives. But I don't know about you guys, but when I'm stressed and things happen, I might eat that bag of chips and those kinds of things versus, go to the gym and work out. So I know that habits and behaviors are really hard to break, but that's the real key in terms of cost, is prevention. The other thing beyond prevention in disability management is early intervention. You've probably heard that phrase. So the sooner we can get in, the sooner we can look at things, the better it is. I just heard a statistic yesterday, I think it was from the US, that after 12 weeks of being off work, only 50% of people actually return to work. The other thing we want to know is work is healthy. So everybody, you feel like you're a part of the society, you're collaborative with your community, those kinds of things. You're really contributing. So work is a healthy thing for everybody. So in terms of going back to those roles and responsibilities, I'd like to just focus today on the three key ones. So that's the employee, the employer, and of course, the benefits provider. There's lots of others out there like medical practitioners and healthcare providers and those kinds of things, but I'd like to just focus on those three today, and I think that's a good target to start. So in terms of the employee, some of the responsibilities and roles that they play is to be, as I said, proactive with their health and their treatment, to utilize all of those good programs that the employer provides for them to ensure that they're living and leading the healthiest lifestyle they can. It also means being proactive for when a health absence or a health condition occurs. So, making sure they're talking to their doctor about their condition, taking a list with them of all their questions they may have so that they can be informed of what their condition is, and also what they can expect in terms of recovery and the treatment that they're going to get and the time frame for those treatments. The other thing is if they're if they are waiting to see a specialist or have an MRI or see a psychologist or anything like that, to try and get on those waiting lists or those cancellation lists so that they can get in and be seen, because we know that there are some shortages in some of the treatment that are out there, and so that's really important for them. The other thing that's important for them in their role is to ensure that they're communicating with their employer, to ensure that the employer knows how long they're going to be off for, as well as talking to their medical provider and having them really understand what the functional demands of their jobs are. Talking to the insurer and making sure that they are engaged in that process as well. They're completing all the paperwork that's required from both the employer and from the insurer, the benefits provider. They are seeing their medical professional on a regular basis and following the recommended treatment programs. As well, they're maintaining regular contact with everybody, and they're willing to, so once they've been off for a while and they're ready to come back to work, they're willing to accept smaller accommodations and changes in their jobs so that they can be successful and be back to work. And then while they're participating in a return to work program, they're looking for, they're booking their medical appointments and things outside of those return to work hours so that they can participate in their return to work and that work hardening and still maintain their treatment. By the way, if there's any questions, I can't see everybody, but if there are any questions, feel free to jump in. So that's the kind of the key points of the roles and responsibilities for the employee. I'd like to go into the employer a little bit. While I'm not a human resources expert, but this will be from a disability management perspective in terms of what we see and what we'd like. So there are multiple roles, as we know it, in the employer. We've got human resources and the direct manager and supervisor, and those are the two kind of places in the organization I'd like to just touch on a little bit. In terms of human resources, these would support recruiting to ensure that the managers hire the right people for the right jobs, supporting and encouraging a corporate culture of inclusiveness, support, and caring, provides wellness programs, so all of those great wellness programs, ensures that job descriptions are available that include both the physiological components and needs of the job, as well as the emotional needs of the job, or demands of the job, ensures that it helps write all of those policies and procedures, and then educates the organization on those policies and procedures, and then ensures that the managers apply all of those policies and procedures consistently with all of the employees. They participate and liaison with the insurer to educate people on what the policies are in terms of how to complete all the paperwork and things that are needed when somebody is off. So all those forms, whether they have forms within your own organization that the employee requires, or the forms that the insurance provider provides. They participate and liaison with the insurer to ensure all of those good employer return to work programs are set up and that they can accommodate those return to works. really facilitate communication between all parties within the different organizations within the process. In terms of the manager, so some of their roles and responsibilities, of course, they have to hire the right people for the right jobs. And I think that's really important, because if you hire the right people for the right jobs, that can help prevent issues down the way in terms of complexity of return to works and different things like that when you add on another layer of disability and injury to a situation. They develop strong relationships with their employees and demonstrate caring and an empathetic workplace. They help to educate the direct employee on their practices within the organization and directs them to who the contact people are in human resources to help them through that as well. They maintain communication with the employee while they're off work. And I think that's really important, because that shows that you care, right? That's, if people feel needed, valued, it's really good for them to then want to come back to work. And so for the manager to just call them and say, hey, how you doing? Don't ask medical questions and don't absolutely go into any kind of medical information. Certainly in my experience, most employees will share more information than you as a manager probably even want to know. But at the end of the day, I think that shows a good trusting relationship when that does happen. So, how you doing? Hey, anything I can do to help you? Just as simple as that, right? Again, I kind of alluded to this on the HR side, but treats all their employees fairly and equally, demonstrates the ability to do a reasonable accommodations and determine whether they're permanent or temporary. And then during an accommodation, meets regularly with the employee to ensure that there aren't any barriers, that they're doing well, that if there are any barriers, to feed them to human resources or the insurer to help get rid of those barriers if we can. And then ensure the employee is actually being safe, right? Because some employees, they think, oh yeah, we can do this whole thing and I'm great and fantastic, and then they do something and then it sets them back again. So I think that's important as well. In terms of roles and responsibilities for the benefits provider, so in terms of a claim, so the case manager of a claim requires 3 pieces of information. So a lot of that is educating employers and employees on what we need. So we need the 3 forms. We love our forms in the insurance industry. So we need the claimant statement, the employer statement. The employer statement contains a job description. So it helps us really understand what the demands of that job are, both from a physical and a psychological perspective. And then as well, the attending physician statement. And then it's the case manager's job to look at that, all of that information. They do an in-depth functional or motivational phone interview with the claimant, your employee, to get more information and start developing that relationship with your employee. That functional phone interview, it usually gives us a lot more information that maybe you as an employer aren't even aware of. When we look at all that information, we put it all together, we look at what we know about the condition, what we know about the function, what we know about the job, put it all together and make a decision on the claim, approve, deny. Maybe we need more information. What I can tell you is, even though we are come across, people think of the big bad insurance company never wanting to pay us. In actual fact, we only probably decline about 5% of the claims that come in our door. So we're really not that big bad insurance company. We want to work together with everybody.
So a question for you regarding the employee, well, actually all 3 of these parts together. Do you think that when the employee or the claimant is talking to the carrier, that there's scared me there. Sneak up on me like that. No. Do you find that there's still, from the employee or the claimant's perspective, a stigma, a worry about discrimination if they decide to open up too much with their employer and all this kind of thing? Like Deb said, we're here to break down barriers. We want to open the doors. We want everybody to communicate. But one of the things that we've seen, and I wanted to know your opinion on this, is there still that stigma and discrimination fear from the claimant's perspective? And I guess you would get a lot of that in the telephonic interviews that you have with the claimant?
Absolutely, there's this huge stigma. There's this huge stigma about what should I share with my employer, as well as with my insurer. A lot of times, if we're not doing those really good functional phone interviews, we're going to get what the employee thinks we want to hear, right? Because they're afraid we're not going to pay their claim if they don't say the right thing at the right time. And that's not what it's all about. It's all about getting good information holistically to be able to make the best decision and help that person on their path to recovery and return to work. And if we can do that, that reduces costs for everybody, including themselves. So thank you. Good question. So once we've done that functional phone interview, we take a look at everything and we make things look like they're good. We would approve a claim, obviously, and then set up a unique plan for that client, that employee. That unique plan will include, our expected return to work dates, or it might include, if there's not a return to work date, because they're still struggling with treatment and figuring out what their diagnosis is, it will be an expectation of when we will expect the next medical information. And we talk to them about what is their claim, what are the of course, contractual obligations within that claim. But the real key is developing that relationship so that we can get the best information that we can. The other things so as an employer, you should be expecting from your case manager how long they think that person will be be able to come back to work, or when the next update will be, so that they can keep you informed. Because we know as case managers and as insurers that you're struggling as a business to maintain all that productivity and all those things you need to get done while juggling an absence and a hole in your organization. The other thing in terms of the insurer, we have access to rehabilitation tools to help speed things along if we can. And I don't mean that we're forcing people to get better so that we can get them back to work. This is, again, more of a collaborative approach. But we have access to things like, let's get that MRI faster, or let's get some cognitive behavioral therapy, or let's do some physiotherapy to get them on a work hardening program because they've run out of benefits and they don't have the money to pay for them, or those kinds of things. Because this is their second go-round. They've been doing physio for something else, and now they've run out of benefits. So now what do we do? So we have access to all of those nice rehabilitation tools that can help. We also help develop, in conjunction with medical providers, the return to work programs. So, what does that return to work program are? We share those functional restrictions with employers. What are they able to do and what are they not able to do in their job? And then what does that gradual return to work program look like? They actually communicate and liaison all of that from the medical providers and the employers to work together to get that program going. They also educate employers and employees on the terms of the contract. So I don't know if everybody's heard that definition of total disability and what does that mean. There's pre-existing conditions in the contracts. There's all different kinds of clauses. Deb?
So that I would see, can you hear me? I don't even, can you hear me, guys? That to me would be probably one of the challenges that I see is this, as much as we can simplify the language, understand the communication gap we have with this diverse cultural, generational, goes like this. So that's what I would see you guys having a challenge on is how do you better communicate it so that what is pre-existing? What is a beneficiary? Because people don't even know what that word is. Like, it's crazy.
Yep.
We maybe in the field see this and hear it every day, but our clients have told us the employees don't even understand what the word beneficiary means. So how do you guys see it in your end?
I absolutely agree. And in the insurance industry, we're really good at using jargon and things that and you know what, the medical community is really good at it too, right? So you put that medical and you put all that insurance in there, and then you get this, oh my God, this poor person doesn't know what way is up. So that is a big challenge. The most important thing is to use words people understand. So when you're talking to people on the phone, as as a case manager, I'm going to talk to people and don't say pre-existing condition and spew off the actual contract language. I'm going to say, hey, here's some information that you need to help you understand the decisions we're making, and use words and phrases that they understand, and then ask them questions after you're done that conversation to make sure and they understand what you've just said, because chances are they're not going to understand everything. The other piece is, remember, we're dealing with people who in disability are dealing with potentially life-changing events. And so they're not always hearing everything you tell them, so repetition, right? So every time I'm picking up that phone, we're having a conversation, we're talking about those things in a way and in a language, not using acronyms. I think we as an insurer can do a better job in how we write our letters. So that we're using more simple, easy letters. And I've brought Teddy with me as my team lead, and she knows we've already started doing some of that letter changing to help us make those letters a little more friendly for the people who are reading those letters. I mean, we do have a way to go. We're not perfect by any means, but we absolutely need to make sure that the messages we're hearing are those messages. And we're breaking down that barrier for employees so that they are feeling comfortable in sharing that information. I think our biggest challenge is they think we're just trying to look for ways to not pay them. And like I said, only 5% of claims are actually declined. So we're not looking for ways to pay the claim, but we do have a job to do, right? So there will be some claims. We always hear about those 5%, right? We're in society, that's the norm. Like, you always hear about the worst. You never hear about all the good things that people do. Sure.
Quick question. I won't use the mic. Is there the ability, just again from a communication standpoint, to get documentation in multiple languages?
Absolutely.
I deal with my employees are from various countries, and just we're trying to simplify internally a lot of our training and such, but benefits would be a key one, that they can understand English, or English as a second language. So the ability to have all that documentation in various languages would be of benefit.
I know that as an insurer, we can do a better job at that. Having said that, if there is a specific need, like in the claims management area, if there is a specific need for a client to have a different language, we would certainly hire a translating company to help us with that communication. On a global level, in terms of booklets and things like that, I would have to pass that off to our sales and service area to find that out.
Actually, I have a question on pre-existing conditions, whether you're traveling or whatever, because I get questions on that. There's no sort of documentation to help me say, well, if you've had a heart attack, you have to tell your insurer or whatever. Do you have any kind of documentation on that score? You know, if you had this, you have to tell your insurer before you go travel or whatever.
So in terms of travel, I don't have all the particulars around the travel, but I do know that there is information in our booklets that speak to that.
It talks about pre-existing conditions.
But it doesn't say what they are? Of course not. So I'll just speak generally in terms of a pre-existing condition. Pre-existing conditions usually means if you've sought treatment, investigation, seen a doctor, any of those kinds that had any symptoms for a period of time before the coverage becomes in place, right? So if you've had any kind of condition before the coverage comes in place within an X period of time, and there are different periods of time, 6 months, a year, depending, then you will not qualify for a claim should something happen. And usually now on travel it's different. I'll speak to disability. In disability, you have your coverage date for your group insurance plan, and that's the date. Our standard contract says that you have to, if you've had treatment or anything like that within 6 months, and the claim occurs within a year from your coverage date. So if you have a condition where you sought treatment, done some investigation, had some symptoms, seen the doctor, and they've documented it within 6 months from the date you got your coverage, and you become disabled within a year from that coverage date, that would be a pre-existing condition. Does that help answer you?
Yeah, my question was more specific to travel, but it's
Okay,
fine.
sorry, that's not my
It's okay.
expertise, but we can follow up and get the actual question and get you an answer. So in terms of the roles and responsibilities, that's kind of a little bit reminder. Like I said, I'm not a human resources expert. I hope it was a little bit of a reminder and refresher of some of those good things. Hope that helped you understand the insurer's role a bit better and how the case manager works and what they do. What I thought would be helpful now is to actually do some case studies, because for me, real life examples help me understand and appreciate things better, and it's a little more fun. Like, I don't want to be up here dictating and talking the entire time, so I got some case studies for us to look at. The first case study is Mike the assembler. And so what I thought, so what I thought we would do is I'm going to read to you, and sorry, I'm just going to read it, to you, Mike, the case assembler job. And what I'd like you to do in your groups and your tables is to think about and talk about, after the case has been presented, what do you think of Mike? And what kind of, what are your thoughts? What do you think of his absence? Those kinds of things. And then we'll come back and have a chat about that, okay? So Mike the assembler. Mike the assembler. Mike was hired as an assembler in January of 2018. His group benefits were effective in April 2018. His job as an assembler would be considered medium in nature. He would be required to lift up to 30 pounds on occasion, and he's standing on his feet for the majority of the time. He assembles small farm equipment. He's 42 years old, and at the beginning of his employment, when he was first hired, there were a few times when he had some late days and stuff, but his direct manager had a little chat with him about it, and those stopped. And then he became a very good employee. He worked very quickly. He was very efficient. His quality was good. Mike was married. He had 2 children. And then in late April, early May, the manager noticed that he was making some errors. It was kind of not like him. He had a meeting to discuss those errors and the quality of his work, and the very next day, Mike stopped working and hasn't been back since. So that's the case study. What do people think? Anybody know a Mike? Work in your tables and just have a chat about what you think and some assumptions that you might make, or what you're thinking about Mike as an employee right now. We'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Is that giving everybody enough time? All right. I know that public speaking and coming up in front of everybody can be a bit intimidating and nervous. I was a little nervous to start this morning, so I get it. So I didn't say, hey, give me a spokesperson from your table, but what I thought we could do is just, if you have some observations, or what did you think of Mike, if you could voluntarily share some of the ideas that came from your tables. Exactly. You just
Testing. Hey, no. Okay, so I kind of just digested this as best I could. Where we kind of started is like, well, perhaps there's some sort of underlying issue with Mike resulting in him leaving that maybe we don't know about. We were reading off the case, you'd mentioned, he's married, he has kids, he's got a home life. Perhaps there's something with the home life factoring into his absence all of a sudden. In my infinite HR wisdom that I claim to have, not really. I said, like, we should treat this on good faith right away. Never assume that this person's just gaming the system and taking advantage of it. But of course, if you want to have that closed door, backdoor meeting to say, it looks like it's possible he could be taking advantage, let's assume the best, not the worst with this individual. So then you kind of got to go through the rigmarole with this individual. How long has he been off? Has he contacted anybody? Like, is there been any contact, or has he abandoned his job? And then you got to take the ownership on yourself to try to reach out to that individual. Say, hey, Mike, haven't heard from you. We'd like to hear from you by, say, this date. If we haven't heard from you, we're going to assume that you've abandoned your role and we will terminate your employment. If it gets to that, I don't know. There's a million different ways to approach this, but that's where I'll leave it for now.
Okay. Good, thank you. Excellent. Any other observations, comments? I guess it was a big of a hint because I'm the disability insurer, so you know there's a claim coming, right? But let's pretend there isn't.
So we kind of touched on a lot of the same stuff, but we really focus on the communication aspect with the employee. They may not be educated in the process as well. Things like return to work, accommodations, you know, some restrictions that they may have, we may be able to work with that. So before we jump to the worst case scenario, we said same thing. Is there things that are happening that they need to know? Sometimes we said that employers have a hard time reaching out to the employee and having that human conversation, and it usually starts with that. So we kind of took that approach.
Good job. Yeah, great. Thanks. Others? Somebody over here?
Oh, okay, how do we turn this on, Phil?
Hello? Nope.
Did you want me to fill the gap while you're...
Yeah, do that.
All right.
I don't dance, so sorry.
So Deb alluded that I'm with Bridges Health, and a lot of what we do is assist the insurers, the employers, and the employees, basically bridging that gap. And what we find a lot of times in this circumstance is, Sherry, you made a great point about trying to get everybody together as quickly as possible to figure out what the issues are, because to be honest, there's a lot of times when you're going through the assessment phase, you're dealing with symptoms and you're not actually able to get to the chronic condition. So in fact, that could be potentially the case. So what we would do is bring in the healthcare professionals and the teams that are working with that individual. And as we all know, mental health is a big concern right now, so I'm just going to jump on that one for a minute. Lots of times you'll have a psychologist, you'll have your GP, you'll have other people within inside of that healthcare team. So what it's important is getting them together as fast as possible to have a conversation versus doing the traditional letters, faxes, things like that. Because next thing you know, you're 6 weeks versus 20 minutes. I know that's not easy, but that's something we do, and with great success. Two things happen. The employee feels like they're supported by their employer and their benefits providers, and the employer feels like, okay, we know there's a plan. This person's okay. It's not a performance-related condition. So lots of things happen very quickly that way.
Great, thanks.
Is this marked? Can I get this?
Did you press the mute button there?
Did I fail already?
Press the button on the mic, make the yellow light go away.
Go away.
Go away.
Oh, there we go. Yay. Technology's wonderful when it works.
The question that the discussion we had at our table was around how long would we wait before we communicated with the employee if we hadn't heard from them. And if I was to ask many of you in this room, how many of you would be fearful of contacting an employee at home on the basis that you'd have some concern that you're somehow infringing upon privacy? Is that a concern? How many people would have a concern around that? Anybody? Because I know I hear that all the time from managers. Well, are we allowed to contact? And generally speaking, the law's on the side of the employer. If you're paying for somebody to be off work, you have a right to at least have some idea of why they're away. So, I mean, not that you should infringe on asking them for all their details on why they're away, but at least get some sense of what the issue is so that legitimately you can make a decision. So there's nothing wrong with that, but I know a lot of employers are fearful of doing that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if you do that, that opens the door for you to say, how can I help you? Is there stuff that I can do to then help you recover, come back to work, those kinds of things. Sorry, Deb. Yeah,
that's okay. So probably one of the other challenges that I understand that a lot of businesses here today are ranging in size and in respect to your HR resources. So if you're fully stocked on the HR side, you've probably gone through training, you probably know the questions, how to ask, how sensitive you can be, where the privacy line crosses, all that stuff. I think the challenge we're going to find is, as we see more and more of these ones that you really can't put your finger on, is when I'm dealing, and we've got like over 600 clients, so there's many, many small to mid, and they don't have those resources. And so when you're asking John, the construction guy, who's just hired 4 guys in the field to deal with this situation, he hasn't a clue where to start. And he doesn't know what he can say. And sometimes they will say too much and ask too much, and then we have another problem, right?
That's right.
So.
Yep, for sure. Sure.
So sitting in the employer role, I would be like many of you in this audience, and I would always want to know, like I would feel that if we have a decent culture and environment at our office, that we should be able to phone an employee. Although my HR person would tell me we got to be careful with this and that and everything else, I still would want to be able to phone to say, hey, where are we at? Like, have we got something that's going to be 6 months, 3 months, 1 month? But of course, can we help? But I think we can't be fearful of trying to call somebody because we have a gap in our organization. And for those of you who run smaller organizations where you don't have a lot of overlap, everybody's going to have to pick up that load. So it's even more important for you to be able to have that answer to know what you should be doing. Do you have a 1 week or a 1 month? And if you've only got 3 or 4 or 10 employees, you're really going to have a gap. So I'm in the same boots that all of you are in, but I'm coached by our HR person who says we got to really put on the brakes. But it should be mutual because we both respect each other.
Do you want, yeah, okay.
I'm not an attorney, and maybe you can provide me with
Neither
some
am I.
guidance on this. But last I heard, or last I was educated, is you can talk about prognosis, not diagnosis, right? So a lot of the things that you said, when are we going to expect you back? How can we support you? You know, what are the limitations and restrictions that we can build into your job to get you back to work as soon as possible? Not the, what is your, you know, what have you been diagnosed with, et cetera. So.
Yep, no, that's absolutely correct.
Because we talked about the HR and, you know, HR scares us with what you can't say, but, you know, sometimes, yeah, versus what you can say. So.
I think, so from my perspective, one of the things that I've observed is when HR people are doing that, and I think it's good, like I'm not knocking HR people, and I know there's a lot of them in the room, so by all means, I'm not making any enemies here. I think what they're afraid of is what is that manager going to say to that employee, and then what kind of trouble are they going to get in for the organization, right? So it's really, what I would like to see is more making sure, rather than saying don't contact that person, because who's got the best relationship with that employee? Their direct manager, right? So, oh, hello? Okay, they're good. So for me, it's around making sure you're having a conversation with that manager to say, this, what are you going to say? How are you going to approach it? That kind of thing. And then by all means, jump in and have that conversation, because you're right. Now, make sure as the manager you're not putting that extra pressure on that person because you've got a gap to fill, that you're, you know, making them feel like they're being forced back to work. How many people have heard that from the managers, right? I've got this huge gap. I don't know what to do. I'm not getting approval to replace them, and everybody's dying in overtime, and I really need you back. No, that's not the conversation you want the manager to have. How are things going? How are you doing? Is there anything I can do to help? I'm not putting any pressure on you. I just want to understand, you know, when do you expect that you think you might be back? That kind of a supportive conversation versus putting your needs first, right? It's all about empathy and understanding what's on the other side of the fence to be able to talk and have effective communication. It's all about motivation and working together, collaboration, not that, let's get them back to work because I've got this real problem. Do you have a question here?
Yeah, just that gentleman over there was mentioning that, you know, if they weren't receiving any response from the employees.
I was just saying the gentleman over here was indicating if they didn't receive a response from the employee, then they may pursue the termination of the employee. Is that something feasible? Is that something that employers do or can do or are allowed to do?
Absolutely, and I'm not the expert, so I'm going to come to these guys over here who are really good experts in the human resources piece and throw that question to them if they don't mind. Is that okay? Am I putting you on the spot?
No, that's fine. No.
Okay.
Yeah, the reality is if you don't have a good reason why an employee's off work, yes, you can basically terminate them. If obviously they have a disability, but they haven't communicated that to you, that's not your fault. And so legitimately you could terminate somebody. I was sharing at our table, with one of my former employers, we actually had an employee who suffered from schizophrenia. And he was an okay and absolutely a fine worker as long as he was taking his medication for his medical condition. But periodically he would stop taking his medical condition, and all of a sudden he would decide that I'm not going to work. He just wouldn't show up. And this happened on 2 or 3 occasions, but at the time we did not know what his medical condition was. And then one time he just didn't show up for work and we didn't know where he was. We tried to contact him, we couldn't get any communication. We contacted our union and asked if they knew why, and they said, well, we can't tell you anything, so that didn't help us. We contacted his doctor because we knew who his doctor was. His doctor wouldn't tell us anything because of privacy issues. So we sent him a letter and copied the union and everybody else saying that he's being terminated. Well, all of a sudden, everybody cooperated. And his union contacted us and said, well, he has this serious medical condition. We said, well, we didn't know that. And his doctor even contacted, says, yes, he suffers from schizophrenia. Well, okay, then we were able to get him help, and actually we reversed the termination and got him on our long-term disability plan. But yes, in the absence of information, yes, you can absolutely terminate, and there's nothing unlawful about doing that.
Yep. Good answer. Sure.
Can I? Oh, God. You do sneak up. Oh, you're not running.
Just to follow through with that then, not to be, is that a pre-existing condition that you should have known? No, as far as the law, you said that particular employee ended up on the long-term disability. So I assume that they'd had that condition prior to the employee. And I'm just trying to be,
absolutely,
I guess, doing your role.
Absolutely, and that's a good job. You want to come and work as a case manager? No, okay. So it really does depend on the length of time that he's been with that employer and had coverage. So if he had that coverage and it was in place for greater than a year standardly, then no, it would not be a pre-existing condition and the claim would be a valid claim. If it was within that first year of coverage, he sought treatment and whatnot, then it would be a pre-existing condition. And you know, some of the toughest parts of this job are looking and applying that pre-existing condition on claims where, you know, those terminal illness cancers that, you know, they're dying and they are totally entitled to total disability and you can't pay them. And that breaks your heart. That's one of the tough parts of the job. Any other comments, questions, thoughts before we talk about the outcome of Mike, the assembler? Oh, one more, yeah. Or two more, actually.
I just want to play devil's advocate. Nobody in the room has said that they think Mike might just be working the system, and I feel like if we don't represent that side, then we're remiss today. So, I mean, we don't have a lot of information, and we know now Mike is sick, and he's not been back, and he's gone silent. And that doesn't seem very collaborative. And when I look at his history in his, whatever it is here, 5 months of employment with this new company, he seemed to be a great worker, but he did have a few late starts when he was first hired, and he was met with about that. I've certainly had situations like that when I was a manager in a previous role. And in that scenario, I had a good worker too. He was amazing. But the late starts raise red flags with me. And the stories that they can weave are incredible. So, you know, you try to be supportive. You try to recommend, you know, setting 2 alarms and whatnot. Who's to say that he isn't staying up till 2 a.m. playing video games, or he's got a side hustle and he's working at a nightclub till 0200 hours. There's all these possibilities, and I just had to raise them today because as an employer, we need to consider that too. I mean, we can't always be a bleeding heart and say, you know, we're gonna, I mean, I know it's great to give the employee the benefit of the doubt, but sometimes maybe they just don't deserve it.
She's the skeptic in the crowd. That's a really good point. And you know what? It's those employees. So when I think about those kinds of situations, and even in claims, remember I said 5% are declined. That 5% takes up a lot of my resources and time, as it does you as an employer, right? Most people, 95%, 98% of people are honest and good workers and have just a bad situation that's happened that they're trying to deal with. But there are those ones out there. And for me, when those things, that's when you pull in your policies and your practices and your procedures and you treat everybody fairly and well. I'm going to say this, and I don't want you to think I'm the big bad insurer when I say this, by using those policies and making sure they're fair and collaborative and helpful, you almost allow them enough rope to hang themselves. Sorry I said that, but that's kind of what I would do. Even as an insurer, I stay curious, right? So in those situations, who's the best person to give you a really good sense of that employee? Their direct manager, right? So if they've got some gut things happening in their thing and those kinds of things. One, I think about, for this guy, how did he make it through his probation? Not that I, right? Like, it's just a thought, right? Maybe he was that good, but and maybe that manager made those calls that are well made. They were well made, so that's great. At the end of the day, the manager's the best person, and what's your gut screaming? And then I say, stay curious, ask questions, right? The more questions, the more things, and hey, Mike, you just told me this, but just the other day you told me this, so help me understand the difference. And it's usually those kinds of scenarios that give you those red flags that then you can go forward and go, maybe I should be doing a different route. Yeah.
One quick question. One thing I get asked a lot from employers is, what if they don't believe their employee? What recourse do they have in coming to us, coming to you, coming to their case manager? It happens all the time where they're Facebook friends with their employee or that kind of thing, and see, well, you can't come to work, but you can go sledding or skiing or whatever the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. This is when I say we all need to communicate well, and but when I say communicate well, we also have to communicate objectively. So don't tell me, hey, we think he's scamming, and put that in an email and send it to me, because with the new privacy laws, clients, employees can ask for their entire file, and we have to give it to them. So objectively, you need to tell us that information. We need to know, hey, for the last year, his performance reviews weren't stellar. Hey, that manager just gave him a reprimand and then he went off work. And we're not looking at, you've got those judgments, you've got those conclusions. We're objective. Give us the objective information and we'll look at that. We'll put that with the medical information that we have, and we'll make an objective decision in the situation. But it's really imperative to share that information with us, because we don't know your employees. Your managers, your supervisors know your employees. You know what you've dealt with throughout that time with them. So even some of that stuff leading up to the absence, or those kinds of things, and you will get your case managers calling, and usually it's are your plan administrators or your human resources people, and saying, hey, I need to know more about this person. Can you tell me? What was he like as an employee? What is his history? Those kinds of things. And it's really good information to have. And you can have an off-the-record conversation, potentially, if you're really feeling strongly about it. The other thing I want you to know is, with social media, case managers actually do Google searches for people on social media now. So that's a standard practice. So we'll do a search to see what their Facebook looks like, or Instagram or Twitter or whatever they're using. So that is a standard now for case management.
Sorry to be the party pooper. We have to move forward.
Yep.
But I want to make one note. You know what? We talk about on good faith. We have to we have to just hope that this is all good.
Yep.
But in the same token, I totally understand we have to be watching to make sure that, sorry, Phil, we have to be watching to understand, maybe that gut has to play into it a little bit. So maybe that's where these two gentlemen come in, and we get into this, and when we get into HR strategy and training those managers, what they can say, what they can't say, how they say it, how they reply, right, how they react, and all those kind of fun things. So I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thanks.
Sorry.
I was just going to comment on just what you were saying, and to her point here as well, is, like all things, these things are complicated, and there really is no black and white way to go about it. One of the three most powerful words I think I've used in my career are, I don't know, and then taking ownership and figuring it out. And then finally, the last thing I would say when it comes to these sorts of things, always kind of have that in the back pocket that the worst could possibly happen, but always assume the good. I'll share just some wisdom I found on a gambling cessation pamphlet that said, hope to win, expect to lose.
Yeah, I've read that before too. for sure.
There is standing tables. This is thank you to Karen. She slipped out. Standing tables for those who need to move around a little bit. So you're welcome to go over here and take a break.
All right. All right, so let's get back to Mike the Assembler. Really great discussion, and I'll try to go through this quickly just because I think we've touched on a lot of the points that that we wanted to talk about. So Mike the Assembler, he did contact his manager and tell him after the fact that he was going to be off, and so then they could start that claims process to happen. He wasn't at that point sure how long he would be off for, but here's some background information that the case manager was able to come and get and obtain through the case review and the functional phone interview that you as the employer weren't aware of. So Mike has a long-standing history of major depression. It stems from being abused from his alcoholic father. He was on 3 different medications, and his doctor is now trying to adjust those medications. A month after he was hired, his wife told him she was leaving and that she was taking their 2 young children with her. His father died in May of 2018. So you can see how this is all adding up. His mortgage is behind, and they had a $40,000 credit card debt. Am I on the right slide here? Okay, sorry. He sees his family doctor every 2 weeks. He does have a sister who's supportive and lives in Ontario. He's experiencing a lack of energy and motivation. He's having a hard time with concentration, memory, and he wasn't sleeping, and he's gained 20 pounds in the last 3 months. So that's all the information that we were able to gather through the case management. So obviously in terms of outcome, we actually approved the claim. We supported the claim for a 3-month period of time at the initial onset, and we told the employer that he would be off for at least 3 months and potentially even longer. Mike was able to find another psychiatrist to help him because his other psychiatrist was retiring, but he was able to get a referral, and they did that coordination. As a result of the case management, we recognized that he needed some help, so we wanted to provide some additional help for him, and we wanted to ensure that he got good help with a psychologist, so we engaged cognitive behavioral therapy for him. The cognitive behavioral therapy helped him develop a really good concrete plan and to help deal with his issues, and there were several, as you could see, for him to deal with. Through that process, we determined that 3 months maybe wasn't quite enough, but that he needed a little more time because of the multiple issues he was dealing with. And so we extended the program for 3 months. But during that 3-month period, we also talked about how we could do a supportive return to work for Mike. So we reached out to the employer during that 3-month extension, asked them if they were able to accommodate the return to work. The employer was able to accommodate. And what that accommodation allowed Mike to do is to learn all the new tools and techniques he had learned from the therapist to apply them while he added the stress of being back to work. So that was really important for him to be able to understand that and work through that. Mike actually participated well in the return to work program. One of the things I was going to say is without all of that collaboration and that communication and working together holistically, Mike might still be struggling through this whole process. As we know, the medical community, especially in the psychological health treatment arena, is behind, and it can take you months to get some support and to be able to work through some of that. So Mike might still be struggling and trying to figure that out and floundering around without all of that good support. As a result of all that good support and helping him with his return to work program, you ended up with a better employee than you had before. He was even more loyal to the employer, and it was a success story. One of the things that, as I talk about that, there are some, I said I wanted to give you some tools and resources. In this presentation, there are some, of course, this is a mental health case, so there are some resources that I just wanted to quickly share with you that I've found. The 3 blue boxes there on the left-hand side of the presentation are from the Canadian Mental Health Association, and the first one is a discussion on mental health in the workplace. The second one contains real-life stories of people who have mental health and are working through them as they work in the workplace. And the third one is Managing Mental Health Matters, and it's a first-of-its-kind program focused on helping managers, supervisors, and other leaders learn how to effectively recognize and manage mental health in the workplace.
Just so you know, if you want to copy the presentation that will have this information on it, we'll be sending them out if you want to.
Yep.
We'll probably send them out to everyone.
Yep.
That'd be easier.
Yep. So as well, in terms of as an insurer, I often hear, oh, you know what, as an employer, I can't accommodate. Well, guess what? I'd be remiss if I didn't include a little link to the Saskatchewan Human Rights and the duty to accommodate for employers. And what I would recommend is, we're really good as employers getting all those accommodations for those workers' compensation board claims because, there's a direct impact and you'll get a penalty if you don't and all those kinds of good financial impacts. Well, on the disability side, guess what? If you can help us and you can pay somebody to go back to work, that reduces the claims costs, and so eventually that might hit the premium costs, and therefore your rates might. Now, I'm not going to guarantee anything because it's a very complicated situation and certainly beyond what I can do, but it does help. So I'll say. And then the last one is a new website that was actually new to me, and it's called Ask Jan. It is an American website. I find that the Americans are a little bit ahead of us in terms of resources, and it's a really good website that you can go on to, and it helps employers look at practical, easy things to do to help with workplace accommodation. And then, of course, just a few resources for the employee in terms of on the left-hand side, I've got three resources. We're all employees as well as human resources and those kinds of things. So I wanted to share these three on the left are things that the Canadian Mental Health Association developed to help people recognize if they have a mental health issue. They also they're short, quick little questionnaires, and it's even hard for people to even talk about some of this stuff with even the treatment provider, so they can go on, do these assessments, bring the results to their doctor, and have a really good discussion. So I think that was helpful. The other thing is in Saskatchewan, there is online therapy available for cognitive behavioral therapy that you can go on and you access online therapy, and that might be helpful for some folks as well. And of course, there's always the EFAP that all you wonderful employers provide for your employees. So those are some tools for an employee. I've got my second case study. This is Sally, sales associate. Yeah, sorry. Are we running out of time?
Well, you know what? I'll give you about, can you do this like in about 7 minutes?
Ooh. Should we maybe open it up to questions or do you want me to just read the case and I'm open to whatever you want to do.
Because I would love to go to the second case, but then I don't want to lose time on the
absolutely
panel.
not.
And if we're all staying for lunch, because I think most of us are staying for lunch, I mean, if we move to 11:50, are we good with that? Yeah?
I mean, if they would prefer the panel, I'm okay.
10 minutes?
10 minutes. Let's go quick. We'll do it quick, and maybe we won't do the group thing, and we'll just go through the case, and that'll speed it up. How does that sound? Okay. So, Sally, sales associate. So I'll read through the case. Sally, she was hired in September of 2014. She's a 49-year-old lady. When she was first hired, she worked as a first-level sales associate for a year, and then right after that, she was promoted to a second sales associate level, and then within 3 years, they promoted her to the vice president of sales. She was a star performer. All of her sales goals and targets were met, and she exceeded all those targets. She is single. She was never married. She never missed a day, and she was actually one of those people who worked a lot of extra time, and she was networking with her clients and getting all those prospects and all that good stuff. Since being promoted to the vice president of sales, her sales in the area have declined, and she's starting to feel some real pressure from her manager to get those results better. Then in June, she slipped on some stairs on her way out of her house and hurt her back. She didn't have any broken bones, but she had lots of bruises and contusions. And since that fall, she's started having some late days. She's periodically missed some time. And then at the end of June, she stopped work completely, told her employer that she was going to be off, and she was completely off, and submitted a claim for disability benefits in July of 2018. At this point, I would say, what do you think of Sally? But what we'll do is we'll just skip to, here's what we discovered when we did our case management. And in what we've discovered as a result of our review was that in college, she actually fractured her back in a car accident. Even though the back was fully healed, that is a pre-existing problem for her. She was sexually abused as a child from her stepfather, and as a result of that, her relationship with her mother is a bit strained. She's always been an overachiever, even in college. She was on the dean's list and was a top athlete. She loved her direct sales job and was missing that direct client contact. She has a sister who lives in town with her, who she's very close to. She was a very social butterfly, and she had a lot of friends who she socialized with and went out. She was hardly ever home, even though she has a dog who she loves dearly and treated her like her child. She owns her own house and was almost completely paid for. Her neat freak tendencies came out, and her house was spotless. She historically required very little sleep, and she has never led a team and is nervous and not confident on how successful she will be. She's not taken any leadership training courses, and of course, she has not shared all of that with her employer. Since falling down the stairs, we've discovered that Sally describes her pain as even worse than when she actually broke her back. She's having difficulty falling asleep. When she gets to sleep, she can only sleep for about an hour, and then she's up again. When she's up at the end of the night, like first thing in the morning, she doesn't feel rested. She has difficulty with cleaning her house. She can't take her dog for a walk. She seems to be crying at the drop of a hat. She can't remember if she's paid all of her bills or not. She isn't going out with her friends anymore. She did go to Emerge because her pain was so bad, and she was lucky enough to see a neurologist at the time, and then they did a rush MRI. The MRI came back with mild degenerative changes, but nothing sinister going on. And the neurologist at the time told her that the pain and the symptoms that she's presenting with were not in keeping with the severity of what he saw on examination or as a result of the MRI. Sounding familiar? Yeah. She was seeing her doctor, though, her family doctor, every 2 weeks, and he had prescribed a very heavy narcotic pain medication for her, which she was taking every 3 hours. And in between those 3 hours, because it seemed to wear off, she was taking two extra strength ibuprofen, and that seemed to be just taking the edge off of her pain. So, as a result of all of that, we would have approved the claim. So the claim was approved, and we told the employer that we had expected that she would be off until the end of October of 2018. The case manager actually stepped in and arranged for a multidisciplinary program to be started for Sally. We recognize that she has some legitimate symptoms, some legitimate problems, but we needed her to understand potentially the hurt versus harm pain, do some education with her, and help her through a reactivation program. And it's multidisciplinary in nature to help her get through that. Through that, we were able to, she was able to wean off of her really strong, potent medications. She did end up on a different medication, which was more for chronic use. That would be more helpful. She worked through the psychological component to help her understand her mind and how it affects her pain and her experience of pain. And as well, through that whole process, she then was able to start very slowly. She learned how to pace her activities so she could start slowly walking her dog a little bit more, doing some cleaning, doing some other socialization things. And so she started to become a little more active, but she learned that she can't do it all at once like she used to do. It's not all or nothing anymore. It's more, thoughtful in how she did it. As well, through that process, what she learned was she was really good at direct sales and really got some enjoyment and fulfillment out of that. And what she realized is, while she was really flattered and thought, wow, I can do this VP sales job, it really wasn't a good job fit for her. So she had a really good conversation with her employer, and they were willing, because they had a good relationship, and they were willing to take her back at that senior sales level job. And so they were able to start a gradual return to work with her, back to that senior level sales job, direct sales job, and then they started recruiting for a new VP of sales. So after that period of time, they did a gradual return to work, back to her job, and it was successful. Comments, thoughts, questions on that scenario?
Stars are stars and not meant to be managers. So keep the people with they're really, really good at. I think everybody heard me. Stars are stars, and they should not necessarily be put into a managerial position or a VP position just because they're awesome. They're awesome because they're awesome. So keep them in that sweet spot of being there. And I think they would have much more success, which we saw. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments, thoughts?
Hello. I'd just like to add to that, actually. That's a very good point, that just because you're a good employee doesn't necessarily make you a good manager. It does require training, and it actually requires a very good human capital plan in place to identify, what are the strengths and opportunities that you need to take to move into that role. And often if we put a good employee into a position that they're not necessarily capable of handling, then we're actually causing more harm than anything. So I totally agree with you, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I find is those kinds of situations where you've got this employee that is now in a bad job really complicates the situation, because she doesn't understand the impact of all of that with her physiological thing that's going on. And so we could spend months or even years trying to figure out what's wrong with her in terms of that pain and what's really going on, until you get to the root cause of the whole thing, because it's more than just one thing. It'll be a multitude of things that are happening with that person. And so really getting to some of those to help break those barriers down to be successful is really important, and saves everybody money in the long run.
Talk about collaboration. Like on all 3 points, there was a physical issue, there was a mental issue, and there was, what's the other issue? Help me out. Physical, mental?
Job fit, financial issue.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. So that's why we talk about one thing doesn't become one thing leads to another thing, which becomes the other thing, which is that bigger than that. I don't know anymore. And so that's why your jobs are really, really difficult.
Yeah. And it's really trying to tease that all out. Like what's really motivating this person? What's really going on? And if you take an approach that you're like let's get you back to work. They need you there, and you know what, we want to reduce our costs and the claims. That doesn't help anybody and help the situation at all, right? Because we're people, we're all people, and we have to work well together to come up with a solution, because there's so many tentacles involved. I kind of think of it as, you know what, it's that duck on the water. They look so serene and calm, but underneath they're paddling their little feet like crazy to try and keep up, right? So how are we for time?
I think, sadly, unfortunately, we have to close this one off, because I'm going to shorten your coffee break. My gosh, Sherry, there was a lot of information shared, and I appreciate all the feedback. And I think that we all know that there is challenges in this from every perspective, and that's when we talk about that team and bouncing it off the people that can be helping you in those areas that you need to. So don't be scared to reach out, and don't be scared to do the things that you need to do internally. So I think about, even our organization, we've got some awesome people, but sometimes we'd like to see them over here, but they really want to be over here. So how do you have this conversation and make sure that they're on the right seat on the bus, right? So it does make it certainly challenging at times. So